Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe. Relation Tales that we're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. Daniel sat on the edge of their meticulously arranged living room, his fingers tracing the rim of a half-empty glass of scotch. Clara's laughter floated down the hallway, a sound he'd once cherished. Tonight it grated on his nerves. "Don't wait up," she said. Standing in the doorway, her dress hugged her figure, her makeup just a little too perfect for a supposed work dinner. "Late meeting?" he asked, feigning casual interest. "Just a team outing." She replied, waving a hand as if brushing off the question. "Networking, you know how it is." He didn't respond immediately, watching her adjust the strap of her bag. "You're wearing the perfume I gave you last Christmas." Clara froze for a fraction of a second before flashing him a bright smile. "You noticed I thought it'd be nice to wear something you liked." Her words should have been reassuring, but they felt hollow. Daniel had built a career on attention to detail, and her sudden changes in behavior didn't escape him. "Have fun," he said finally, his tone even as the door closed behind her. Daniel set his glass down, his mind racing. This wasn't paranoia. It was the beginning of something he wasn't sure he wanted to confirm. The silence in the house after Clara left was deafening. Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting his thoughts simmer. A year ago, he would have dismissed his suspicions as overthinking, but things had changed. Clara had changed. He walked to the hallway where her perfume lingered faintly. His mind raced with memories. The night she'd come home late with flimsy excuses, the sudden shift in her demeanor, the guarded way she handled her phone. Daniel opened his laptop and logged into an account he'd set up weeks ago. Clara's car GPS tracker blinked to life on the screen, showing her heading toward the city. "She'll hate me for this," he muttered to himself. But hate was a small price to pay for clarity. Half an hour later, Daniel sat in his car outside a sleek apartment complex. The tracker had LED'd him here. He watched as Clara's car pulled into the lot, and she stepped out, her smile wide and confident. Then he saw him, a man in his early 40s. Sharp suit, easy charm. Walking up to greet her, Clara tilted her head back, laughing as the man leaned in close, his hand brushing her arm. Daniel gripped the steering wheel, the leather creaking under his fingers. He didn't need more evidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Instead of confronting her, Daniel drove away. Confrontation was tempting, but it wouldn't give him what he wanted. No, he needed something more enduring. The following days were excruciating. Clara continued her routine, as if nothing had changed, her lies flowing effortlessly. But Daniel wasn't idle. He hired a private investigator to document everything: photos, videos, receipts. It all became part of a growing dossier at home. He played his role flawlessly. He didn't accuse, didn't question. Every time Clara leaned in to kiss him goodnight, or offered a half-hearted apology for being late, he responded with common difference. "You're so understanding," she said one evening, her voice tinged with guilt. "I'm lucky to have you." Daniel smiled faintly. "I prefer not to fight over things that don't matter." The line stung her, though she didn't show it. She didn't realize it was the prelude to something far more devastating. Clara's affair with Ryan was intoxicating at first. He was everything Daniel wasn't: impulsive, carefree, exciting, but the cracks began to show quickly. Ryan's charm masked a selfish streak, and his promises of adventure fell flat when the reality of his life came into focus. Their stolen weekends were filled with shallow conversation and fleeting passion. The thrill began to fade, replaced by doubt one evening as she lay in bed beside Ryan. His phone buzzed incessantly. "Your wife?" she asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her tone. He laughed, brushing her off. Just work stuff. Clara stared at the ceiling. The weight of her choices pressing down on her. She'd left behind a stable, loving husband for this, a man who couldn't even give her undivided attention. Daniel's plan came together with precision. He knew Clara's weaknesses, her vanity, her need for validation, and he used them against her. The evidence he'd collected wasn't just for him. He sent copies to Ryan's wife, ensuring her world unraveled alongside Clara's. He froze their joint accounts, leaving Clara financially stranded. But his masterpiece was a carefully orchestrated dinner party, a gathering of close friends and colleagues, where he unveiled Clara's betrayal in devastating detail. The night of the party, Clara was radiant. She greeted guests with her usual charm, unaware of what was coming. As the evening progressed, Daniel stood to make a toast. He spoke of love, trust, and the importance of honesty. His words sharp as daggers. And sometimes he concluded, "We learn that those we trust most are the ones who betray us deepest." He turned to Clara, his gaze cold. "Clara, would you care to explain these?" He held up the photos, the damning evidence for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the room as Clara's face went pale. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling, "please don't do this." "It's already done," he said simply. Clara's life fell apart in the days that followed. Ryan abandoned her the moment his own marriage crumbled, leaving her alone to face the consequences. Friends she thought loyal distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Daniel, meanwhile, moved forward with quiet dignity. He finalized the divorce, ensuring Clara walked away with nothing. In the months that followed, he rebuilt his life. He found solace in new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and eventually met someone who valued him for who he was. Clara, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, haunted by the realization that she destroyed the best thing she'd ever had. Clara sat alone in the apartment she'd moved into, staring blankly at the wall. The dinner party was still fresh in her mind. The shocked gasps, the murmurs of disapproval, and Daniel's calm yet devastating exposure of her affair. She tried calling him afterward, desperate to explain, to apologize, to salvage something from the wreckage, but every call went unanswered. The house they once shared was now a fortress she couldn't breach. Her phone buzzed for a fleeting moment. She hoped it was Daniel, but it was Ryan. A short text, curt and dismissive. "This isn't working out, take care." Her hands shook as she stared at the words. She wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out at the world, but all she could do was sink deeper into her isolation. Daniel, on the other hand, found peace in the days following the dinner party. He spent his mornings running along the river, letting the crisp air clear his mind. His evenings were filled with friends, laughter, and rediscovering parts of himself he buried during his marriage. One afternoon, his private investigator, Mara, stopped by his office to hand over the final batch of evidence. "You've got everything you need if she tries to contest the divorce," Mara said, placing a folder on his desk. Daniel nodded, flipping through the pages. "Thank you, Mara. I appreciate your thoroughness." She studied him for a moment. "You're handling this better than most people would." He smiled faintly. "I decided early on that I wouldn't let her destroy me. She made her choices and I made mine." Mara hesitated. "And what now?" "What comes next for you?" Daniel looked out the window. His gaze distant. "Freedom," he said simply. Clara's new life was a stark contrast to the comfort and stability she once enjoyed. The apartment was small and cold, a far cry from the home she'd shared with Daniel. Her job barely covered the bills, and the social circles she'd once thrived in had evaporated. The friends who remained offered polite sympathy, but kept their distance, unwilling to be pulled into her scandal. She tried dating again, hoping to find someone who could fill the void. But every man she met seemed to remind her of what she'd lost. Daniel's steadiness, his intelligence, his quiet strength. One evening, after yet another disappointing date, Clara found herself wandering through the old neighborhood. She stopped outside the house she called home for so many years. The lights were on, and she could see Daniel through the window, laughing with a group of friends. For a moment, she thought about knocking, about begging for another chance, but the sight of him happy, at ease, froze her in place. She turned and walked away, tears streaming down her face. Months turned into a year, and Daniel's life continued to flourish. It started mentoring young engineers at his firm, finding joy in helping others navigate their careers. He took up painting, something he'd always wanted to try but never had time for. At a charity gala, he met someone new. Lily was warm, kind, and unpretentious. They spent hours talking about everything from art to philosophy. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt a genuine connection. Lily didn't ask about his past, and he didn't feel the need to explain with her. He could simply be himself. One rainy afternoon, Clara showed up at Daniel's office unannounced. She looked different, tired, defeated, but with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What is there to talk about, Clara?" "I made a mistake," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was selfish and stupid, and I threw away everything we had. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am." Daniel's expression softened, but his resolve remained firm. "I appreciate you saying that, but Clara, we've both moved on. What we had is gone, and nothing you say can change that." She nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I understand," she whispered as she turned to leave. Daniel called after her, "Clara." She paused, hope flickering in her eyes. "I wish you the best," he said simply. Daniel's life became a testament to resilience and self-worth. He built a future rooted in authenticity and found happiness in places he never thought to look. Clara's story, on the other hand, was a cautionary tale, a reminder of the cost of betrayal and the fragility of trust. In the end, Daniel's greatest revenge wasn't the exposure, the divorce, or even her isolation. It was thriving without her, proving that her actions couldn't define his life. Clara spent months replaying the night of the dinner party in her mind, the look in Daniel's eyes when he'd exposed her betrayal, the coldness in his voice when he made the final declaration. She had begged him for a second chance, but it had been too late. The damage was irreparable. Now each day seemed to drag by. Her life felt like a collection of half-hearted attempts to move forward, dates that didn't go anywhere, jobs that barely paid the rent, and friends who treated her with a mix of pity and discomfort. Nothing could fill the void left by her decision to break Daniel's trust. Clara sat in her small apartment one evening, scrolling through social media, as she often did, to numb the growing ache. She saw a photo of Daniel smiling beside a woman she didn't recognize. "Lily," the caption said. Clara's chest tightened. "How does he do it?" she muttered under her breath, her heart sinking for the first time. She realized that Daniel had truly moved on. He was happy without her, and that thought stung deeper than any confrontation could have. She had ruined him, and he had built a life that didn't include her. Daniel's life continued its upward trajectory. After his divorce, he threw himself into his career and hobbies, rediscovering parts of himself that had been buried under years of emotional neglect. He volunteered at local science fairs, helping young students with their projects. His colleagues respected him not just for his intelligence, but for the integrity he carried into every aspect of his life. And then there was Lily. The connection they shared felt like a breath of fresh air, an unspoken understanding that grew with each passing day. They took things slow, allowing their bond to form. Naturally, Daniel felt secure with Lily. But it was more than that. He felt alive again, he was loved. But more importantly, he loved himself again. Something he hadn't been able to do during his marriage. One evening, as they walked along a beachside path, Lily turned to him. "What happened with your ex-wife, Daniel?" "You don't talk much about her." Daniel paused, his eyes on the horizon, taking in the beauty of the moment. "It was a hard chapter in my life," he said softly, "but I don't regret it. She taught me a lot about myself and about what I deserve in a relationship." Lily smiled, squeezing his hand. "You deserve someone who sees you for who you truly are." Daniel nodded, his heart swelling with a newfound sense of clarity. "I think I finally found that." Months passed, and while Clara tried to move on, something always felt missing. Every encounter seemed shallow. Every friendship tinged with the feeling that something essential had been lost. One morning, she received an unexpected call from an old friend. "Clara, you need to see this." It was a link to a post on social media, a photograph of Daniel and Lily at a charity event. They looked happy, at peace, completely in tune with each other. The caption read, "The best moments in life come when you least expect them." The jealousy hit her like a physical blow. She quickly shut her phone off, not wanting to admit how deeply the sight of them together had unsettled her. But even as she pushed the thoughts away, the realization began to set in. Daniel was no longer part of her life. He had found someone who appreciated him for the person he was, not the person he was supposed to be for her. Clara had spent days doing over her feelings, but something inside her snapped. The desire for closure, for redemption, leading her to make a decision. She would go to Daniel, face him, and ask for forgiveness one last time. She drove to his apartment, her heart pounding in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. But she couldn't. She needed to see him, to tell him how sorry she was, even if it didn't change anything. When she arrived, Daniel was outside, his back to her as he loaded some groceries into his car. He turned around when he heard her footsteps. For a moment he looked confused, and then the recognition dawned. "Clara," he said, his voice neutral but firm. "I'm sorry," she blurted out, her voice shaking. "I was wrong. I ruined everything. I've been lost without you. Please, Daniel, I need you to know how much I regret what I did." Daniel set the groceries down, his gaze steady. "Clara, it's been a long time." Her eyes welled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "I know I've tried moving on, but every day feels like a weight I can't shake off. You were my everything, and I threw it all away for nothing. Please just let me make it right. I'll do anything I can change." Daniel stood silently for a moment. "You can't change what's already happened, Clara." She flinched at his words. "But he wasn't finished. You made your choice, and I made mine. I learned that I deserve someone who values loyalty and honesty. I'm not that person anymore. The one who let you back in after everything you've done." Clara's throat tightened, and she choked on a sob, realizing there was no more room in his life for her. "Goodbye, Clara," Daniel said gently but firmly. "I hope you find peace, but it's not going to be with me." As he turned away, Clara collapsed against the side of his car, her body shaking with the weight of her regret. Daniel didn't look back the day Clara left. Daniel realized that his real revenge was not in the exposure, the divorce, or even her public downfall. His victory lay in the quiet contentment he had built in the aftermath. Peace of mind, self-love, and the promise of a future filled with possibility. With Lily by his side, Daniel knew he was free. Free from the manipulation, the heartache, and the years of doubt. As Clara's story faded from his life, Daniel's blossomed. He was no longer haunted by the betrayal or weighed down by the need for closure. His peace was the most powerful form of revenge, thriving without her living the life he had long deserved. Clara, meanwhile, had no choice but to face the consequences of her actions. She spent her days in a haze of regret, trying to patch the broken pieces of her life. But the truth was clear. She had lost the one person who had ever truly cared for her. Daniel's calm resilience in the face of her betrayal was the ultimate reminder of his strength. She had thought she could escape the constraints of loyalty, but in the end it was she who had been left behind, lost in a life of fleeting satisfaction and hollow relationships. As she looked at her empty apartment, Clara realized that she would always carry the weight of her decisions. But no matter how hard she tried, she would never be able to reclaim what she had lost.